So while we wait for the questions in the chat, do you have anything, to ask each other, comments or thoughts?
We were chatting, Anna and Erin, in our breakout room about, our memories of children at school. So I've got a 16-year-old, Pete's got a girl, his daughter's at primary school. And I was trying to remember back what that space looked like for him. And actually, my memory of it is it was actually pretty well designed. There were lots of sustainability activities. But you're right, at the weekend, Henry and I used to go to the school to play basketball, in fact, your reference at the weekend, but it was deserted. And that's in the talk that, we just gave, the kind of the nature of space and how it's not considered to be integrated into people's lives. And especially given there's so many schools that people spend so much time at is really interesting. So, but that resonated really well, thinking back about Henry's school. And his current school is exactly the same, pretty much.
Actually, I've got a really good example on top of just linking to what you said, Peter. On the weekend, I drove past the first school that we worked with, which is in our local community. And it was packed with a group of Indigenous youth so they were learning one of the traditional Māori kind of war. We use taiaha to kind of do haka and stuff like that, and they were all there in that space. They were in one area, and then I could see another family with their kids riding around the bike track on the thing. So, we have noticed particularly that it brings the community in and owns that space. And I think connecting to what you were talking about is that creates more opportunities for learning interactions that aren't scripted and aren't,
Yeah, part of a curriculum. That's right. Right.
Yes.
We have one of the questions in the chat is whether you have been able to involve families. And that is for Hannah and Erin, but I suppose that Peter and Pete will also be considering that.
Yeah, so a big part of what we know in New Zealand about what works for kids is that their families need to be involved in their education. So we're very conscious of that, and we really push schools to use the journey of transforming their outdoor spaces as an opportunity to better engage with their families. And when we use the word families in Māori, we say whānau. And whānau, the idea of whānau is not just mum and dad and brother and sister, it's your granddads and your aunties and your cousins. And so we very much advocate for it's got to be a collective approach. Not only does that ensure there's a richer final product and process, but it also means that schools have started to bridge that. They often find it difficult to engage with families, particularly families of our Māori kids. So this is a step in that process to help them build their relationship and start to embed those meaningful relationships with the community, families, so on.
And also to value the skills and knowledge that families bring. Because it gives families a really active way to share that knowledge that might otherwise in a really more traditional built environment might not be able to be shared. So we're creating spaces that prioritize different ways of thinking and being and what is valued.
Another question is about from where did you get unexpected support? So the positive surprise. There's also the negative. Where was the deepest resistance? But I think both questions deserve a separate answer, and actually from both projects, I would say. So where do you find the unexpected support and perhaps also the expected support?
Well, let me go first because we are way earlier in our process than Hannah or Erin are in their project. Most of the answers to questions I'll be asked is I don't know yet. It's hard to tell. So we don't have supporters or resistors, or we're going to very shortly come up against that phenomenon in both ways around. So, but Hannah and Erin, it'd be interesting to hear about, your answer, what you found and how you both brought people and recruited people and dealt with any resistors. We don't have them yet.
I might just quickly talk to some unexpected support that we've noticed in our few years. First of all, it's very interesting engaging with families. Often mothers, I have to say, mothers make the world go round. They often come to the space, particularly when we start co-designing and thinking about what reimagining these spaces for their kids, they will often come really unsure of why they're there and with lacking a lot of confidence about what they can contribute. And what we notice over the process is they come out of themselves and realize that they have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, no matter from what part of the community they come from. And the confidence that builds in them in terms of being able to contribute something of value that they've had in their experiences to the experiences of their children has been really heartening. And that's one of the things that I love the most, and seeing people empowered by the process. So I think not necessarily unexpected from us, but unexpected from the participants as they participate in the process, that they kind of blossom and bloom. Yeah, Erin, do you want to talk about some of the either support or resistance? I know you'll have some things to say about that.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely support what you were saying, Hannah. And also, I think we've had quite a lot of support from the health sector, which makes a whole lot of perfect sense to us, because our project is holistic. We're not saying do this just for education, although we would expect educational outcomes to improve as in schools that we work in. But actually, this is about, who we want to be as a society, and how can we improve childhood health. We don't focus on fat shaming and obesity, and focus on giving kids places where they want to run around, build hills so they want to run up and roll down, do it in a way that is really positive. So I think that's been a really, our public health body here and individuals within it have been really supportive. So that's been really cool, and it's where we think this should be going. Less supportive local government. So like you said, Lena, that schools, are huge landholders, and the opportunity, we all know about the statistics on mental health, of access to green space and equity issues around that. Well, schools are a potential bridge to that. All this sort of work together and create real community spaces. So, but local government, in our experience, in some places has been very hesitant to get behind us, and in other places that we've worked have been really progressive and understanding that this is sort of a potential way of doing things in the future. I think mostly the schools that we've worked in have been really supportive, approached us. So they've seen what we're doing, and so they're excited about it, and they've come to us. So everybody's been really, really supportive. The first school that we worked in, maybe not so much, because that was perhaps us, me in particular, probably going, hey, we should do this because we think this would be great. And the teachers have been, I guess, the biggest point of resistance, because and sort of unable to see of benefits in it. I think, like, I can literally remember sort of scoffing when I talked about bringing beauty into the playground from teachers that just didn't see any place for beauty in schools, or that might have an impact on their enjoyment of their profession and their day-to-day lives. So yeah, different pockets of support and encouragement and discouragement, but it's a long journey.
So one thing that could be in gardens is vegetable gardens. Have you food production? Is that part of the gardens that you're creating? And is that, I'll ask Pete and Peter afterwards, if that is something you're planning? Because there's a huge teaching opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely one of the design elements that we advocate for when schools are at the reimagining phase is gardens and growing food. And for us, not only is it that the physical aspect of growing gardens and children understanding where their food comes from, it wrapped around that, as I mentioned, in the outcomes that we're looking for, is how that process can build in our kids the idea of nurturing other people. So, we have in our culture, looking after people through food is really important. So, we have these layers of impacts that can be had just purely by planting a vegetable garden. Yeah, they might learn about seed germination and science and, composting and all of that, but actually they also learn how to look after visitors that come to your school, and you put on a plate for them the food that you grew and that you put love into. So, that side of things for us is also really valuable with those kinds of elements.
Pete?
And the answer is, I don't know. as the answer to most questions yet. But I think the broader thing about, whether it's gardens and sustainability, those kind of things, I think one of the ways of giving back is to share the things that the things that you've known and learned, to share with others. So whichever form it is, and some of those things will be, highly practical and others not. As I said, we're at the very start of this process and don't know how it's going to shape up just yet. So.
Another question was here, how do you handle the allies and the resistors? So that is also Hannah and Erin, because Peter and Pete haven't met any yet.
Oh no, I've got plenty of allies and resistors. That's okay, just in different spaces. That can certainly answer that question. But
and just briefly on that point, because I was going to mention it before in a similar way, but when I was talking about the fellow network and trying to navigate that, and Courtney, who's on the call here, is one of our colleagues, but was able to shine a light on a pathway through that. And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is allies who understand the system, and particularly as we're starting to interface with aspects of the real world here, we're trying to change, processes that have been in place and done a certain way for a long time. And I think particularly as we start to interface with the built environment of the city, and I'm going to share a link in the comments to a article which I really like. It's called it's an article about Bildung, popular education in Sweden, much more than you wanted to know, but talking about these study circles and getting access to those physical spaces to be able to do those things. So thinking about schools, when we're in the breakout room talking about my daughter's school, it's surrounded by 2-meter high fences. It's impenetrable. You physically can't get in there, but also the idea of being able to somehow hire that space to convene people to do something. There's a physical and a psychological barrier to that, but I'm hopeful in a similar way that Courtney was able to illuminate a path through a bureaucratic process. I was speaking to someone who was the ex-CIO for the City of Melbourne, where we work, yesterday, and I'm hoping some allies like that will be able to just show us the right people to speak to, the right doors to knock on, because I think once you can find those paths through, it's not always as hard as it might seem without those allies. So it's more of a statement of hope than experience. Yeah.
Well, Josie's comment I saw earlier up in the chat, and Josie's also one of our fellows, about where do you put your energies? And plainly, you put your energies into the people who get it, and the people who work with you as allies and can help you achieve what you want. But I often feel that I really enjoy the resistors. I don't find people who are resistant particularly problematic. I actually quite enjoy it. And so I think if you approach it from that perspective, it's all win, whichever way you go around. Some of the process might be annoying, but actually the resistors themselves, I think, are worth investing in an interesting way, because you find out interesting things that way. But, don't divide the world up into allies and resistors particularly. It's, as Josie said, it's about where you put most of your energy.
Another way, Peter, that we've, I guess, approached that after having troubles is making sure that we're operating from a place of shared values. So that's the main thing that we talk about when we start in a project. So before we get in there, we talk about why we're there and what our values are, and our values are guided by Te Ao Māori values, so Māori world values, which share similarities, I'm sure, across cultures. But so concepts of, for example, reciprocity. So how will we care for each other throughout the duration of the project? And I'm trying to think of another one, a good example, but so that reciprocity one has been really important for us about, if we've worked on something together, how will we share those ideas together? So that's been a really big part of managing that.
Well, and I think so much of it, a lot in many projects, not just the ones that we're talking about, is about evidencing that you're measuring your impact. And that often goes a long way to solving many problems. Is, one of the points of resistance for many people is, how are you going to show that it works? And actually, if you don't have an answer to that question, it's not good. It's not going to help. So I think you have to have ways of, however you choose to do it, ways of evidencing that you're actually paying attention to, the notion of whether those folks agree that that truly is outcome or impact or not. I think you've got to have an answer to that question, from the very beginning. You have to build, as well as reciprocity, you have to build in the notion of evaluation that everybody understands on, on the terms that everybody understands.
in the chat with whether you work through those principles together at the outset for Erin and Hannah.
Yeah, we do. We're really upfront and explicit about the values that we work by. And we have had an example where we started a working relationship with a school, and very early on red flags were raised to us about the values of that particular leader of that school, and some evidence emerged that they didn't align, their values did not align with ours, and so we said thank you very much, but we will not be working with you, and good luck, we wish you the best. So we're very explicit at the start that this is the values that we work by, and more often than not, schools and people and families and communities have similar values, so it's just about being clear and explicit about that at the outset, so we know we're on the same page. And I would just also add, one of the things that we've learned that we really encourage schools, and this addresses some of the issues around allies and resistors, is to share the journey with your community, like really highlight what you are going through so that everybody out there can see it, including local government, including the Ministry of Education who don't fund it, including those people in the community, artisans, local growers of whatever, our local tribes, so that people know what's happening. And we're lucky, right? Because we say to this school, use your kids to share the message, because people will listen to the kids. They don't want to listen to Hannah talking about the benefits of blah, 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 blah. They want to listen to Hannah's 8-year-old daughter who can say, I really want to blah, 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 right? So yeah, that helps, being able to share the journey with your community.
There's a question here about how to include the elders.
Yep, good question. In Māori society, they're called kaumātua, and they are an integral part of how we roll. So we would expect that a school, if they don't already have a relationship with a local elder, whether it be through their own family connections, or often schools have relationships with elders in the community because their kids went there, then we encourage them to reach out and use their existing families at the school to encourage those people along. If they don't, then we can facilitate. We're really careful that we're not the ones building a relationship, it's the school, but we can support them in ways and guide them in ways that they can connect with their local tribe, their local sub-tribe. So things like that, it's really vital and critical, because they hold the knowledge, they hold the historical knowledge, the handed down knowledge from our mountains to our rivers to our kids today, so that they are an integral part of that collaborative approach.
So Pete, you mentioned the walls around the school, and in the previous session we had 2 American school teachers. In the US, schools are almost fortresses with metal detectors at the entrance and almost barbed wires around the schools. I also wonder what kind of a message is it that we send to children when we send them to school. I mean, they spend their entire day there, and what kind of message is it that we're sending to them about the society that they're growing up in? So my question to Peter and Pete, with regards to the schools that are gardens and where there is this interaction, and you're working with the future workforce, and this is a leading question, so I don't expect to get anything else but a yes. But the people that you are going to develop adult education for, some of them will eventually be today's children. What is it that you're expecting we need in the workforce in the future that the schools need to give to them today, or create for them today?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. But we were only having this discussion yesterday about, how when we were at work in a meeting, talking about how the programs that many schools are putting on are often too near term. rather than looking further out into the future. So Henry, who's my son who's 16, and Pete's daughter is younger, Esther is younger, the programs that they're undergoing now, to my mind at least, are not looking far enough out into the future for when those children join the workforce and become productive citizens. It's still very much written in a narrative of the past that, you know, this instrumental view of skills, learn a skill, get a job. I mean, that's not necessarily how the world is when you're an adult. Certainly the world isn't like that. So I think there's a whole issue about how what we're doing, certainly as adult educators, can have influence on not only, of course, on the adults themselves, but the children of the adults who then have expectations about what they learn. But to back to your question about walls and, you know, kind of fencing off, I think one of the things I guess that inspires some of the things that we're doing in this project, along with many others, is that, you know, it's the notion of material culture, that the things around us, whatever those things are, from the desk to the tie that you don't wear around your neck anymore to the corporate office, are all parts of culture. And they're incredibly important in shaping what we think and how we act. And so I think part of the discussion about how schools look and the playgrounds, and also the discussion in this terms of the cityscape about how the city looks, is it's incredibly important beyond the kind of details of it. So as I said, the banning of cars from streets is probably a pretty good idea. You know, that most, as Jane Jacobs would say, most urban developments has been based around the car, not around the person, and that clearly is not a healthy thing for it to be. But actually, it's more than that. It's more than the fact you can stroll around the street, you know, without being bothered by traffic. It's more that the material culture around you shapes your behavior in fundamental ways. And that's why the cityscape is, you know, is a place ripe for exploitation around being a place for learning. I think it's incredibly important, you know, the very small material details of the things around us, especially at schools, are incredibly important, as Erin and Hannah, of course, would know all too well.